across America, there is a serious 911 emergency crisis. 911 calls to police and firefighters, who are our nation's domestic army, and the same troops who will be called upon to respond to the next terrorist attack, are going unanswered. At least 2/3 of the nation's fire departments are understaffed, according to the National Fire Protection Association, which sets firefighting codes and standards. The shortage is worse in rural volunteer departments that have trouble recruiting new members, but many big and medium-sized cities that are more likely to be terrorist targets are also shorthanded. And in Prince William County, Virginia, and many other financially troubled cities and counties, the reduction in those ranks of first responders are reaching a crisis level. In 1988, Prince William County residents were at risk for a hidden danger. Their own 911 system provided only the illusion of safety. Unfortunately for one of the residents, James Overman, it took his death in the early morning hours of February 23, 1988, for this tragic truth to become public. On the morning of February 23, 1988, Mr. Overman fell in the bathroom of his home and briefly lost consciousness. Concerned about her husband's physical condition and medical history, Mrs. Overman first dialed 911 at 5:55 in the morning and reported her husband's symptoms to the operator, David Batston. Batston answered several questions to determine the nature and severity of Mr. Overman's condition and told her he would get somebody out there. Batston then cleared the call from the 911 computer. A second call to 911 was made at 6:05 a.m. to request an ambulance. This time, a different operator answered the call, and after hearing a description of the symptoms, said that she would send someone out. She classified the call as ALS sickness, ALS denoting advanced life support. The call was forwarded by computer to the Prince William County dispatcher. When the dispatcher received the call, no ALS ambulances were available anywhere in the county. Following the county's 911 procedures, the dispatcher called 5 stations, each progressively further from the Overman's home, before a response was received from the Dumfries Triangle Station 3, which responded at 6:24 a.m. and dispatched an ambulance. At 6:34 a.m., Mrs. Overman made a third call to 911 and told a third operator that her husband had stopped breathing. Mrs. Overman was never told that no ALS equipment or personnel were available to assist her. At 6:37 a.m., approximately 32 minutes after the first call requesting an ambulance, assistance arrived at the Overman home. When the ambulance crew asked for ALS assistance, they were told no ALS units were available. Mr. Overman had no pulse and no blood pressure when the Dumfries BLS crew arrived. ALS treatment was finally administered when Overman arrived at 6:59 a.m. at the Potomac Hospital. He was pronounced dead at 7:21 a.m. from a heart attack. Prior to February 1988, a county Blue Ribbon Commission reported that some volunteer company rescue crews routinely abandoned their stations before the paid crews came on duty at 7 a.m. to enable them to get to their regular places of employment on time. A July 1987 report of the county's emergency medical directors noted a significant gap in ALS coverage between the hours of 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. and called the gap the window of vulnerability. Today, the Insider Exclusive examines the severe crisis in America's 911 emergency services network in America's 911 crisis, and the courageous efforts of Chuck Roberts, partner at Charles B. Roberts and Associates in representing Mrs. Overman, as well as all the citizens of Prince William County, Virginia, to correct and to improve this serious crisis in the emergency 911 services in the county. When Chuck agreed to represent Mrs. Overman, he realized he was going to have to sue all 12 of the fire and rescue departments that serve Prince William County, including all of the fire and rescue chiefs and the 911 dispatcher who received the Overman call. He also realized that the doctrine of sovereign immunity is alive and well in the state of Virginia, and that all of the defendants would likely be immune from liability. Unless, of course, he could prove the defendants committed gross negligence. That is, their acts or omissions showed an utter disregard for caution and the safety of others. He also quickly realized that he could not file suit in Prince William County Courthouse because the jury pool would be the friends and neighbors of the 12 fire and rescue departments and the volunteers who staff the firehouses on the weekends and the weekdays between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. Once his firm filed suit and all the local newspapers began placing the story on the front page, as a result, his firm began to see a significant downturn in new clients. As they feared, the trial court granted summary judgment to the defendants, finding insufficient evidence of gross negligence, and they appealed that decision to the Fourth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals. During oral argument at the appellate court, Chuck Roberts was asked by the judge, "Where is the gross negligence?" He replied that the failure of the rescue departments in knowingly allowing the window of vulnerability to continue resulted in absolutely no ALS personnel on duty between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m., and that constituted an utter disregard for safety and hence his gross negligence. The appeal was denied and the case was dismissed. Tragically, Mrs. Overman became a victim of our government twice. First, the county government failed to honor their commitment to send qualified medical help. And then second, the judicial system of the federal government failed to compensate her for the gross failure of the local government's ineptitude. But as a direct result of the Overman case, the county director of fire and rescue closed the window of vulnerability by scheduling both an ALS and a BLS medic unit for duty between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. each day in Prince William County. Chuck Roberts' goal in pursuing the Overman's case is one of those courageous examples of a lawyer and a citizen doing the right thing for the right reason. Chuck has earned the highest respect from citizens and lawyers alike as one of the best trial lawyers in Virginia and in America. And he has built a substantial reputation nationwide by consistently fighting for everyday people and their cases that other law firms have turned down. He believes that his achievements in life shall be these: that he will have fought for what was right and fair, that he will have risked for that which mattered, that he will have given help to those who were in need, and that he will have left the earth a better place for what he's done and who he's been. Because Chuck knows if you have integrity, nothing else matters. And if you don't have integrity, nothing else matters. Chuck's amazing courtroom skills and headline-grabbing success rate continue to provide his clients with the results they need and the results they deserve. Hi, I'm Steve Murphy, and this is the Insider Exclusive, live from Occoquan, Prince William County, Virginia, at the law firm of Charles Roberts and Associates. It is my great pleasure to introduce Chuck Roberts to the show. Welcome to the show, Chuck.
Thank you very much, Steve. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're going to be talking about a case today, the Overman case,
Yes.
where a gentleman, James Overman, unfortunately died
Yes.
because the 911 service that was available was really not sufficient enough to help him out. Tell us, our audience, a little bit about this case and what happened.
Mrs. Overman came into her office and explained to us the tragedy that occurred at her house. In February 23rd, her husband had fell and went unconscious, fell on the ground. She called 911. She waited for over 42 minutes for an ambulance to arrive. The ambulance that arrived here in Prince William County was not an advanced life support ambulance. It was a basic life support vehicle. It was not equipped to handle a heart attack victim. So the ambulance crew literally picked up Mr. Overman, took him to a local hospital, and about an hour and 4 minutes after he had his heart attack, he was pronounced dead at Prince William hospital. It was a failure of the 911 system here in Prince William County.
Now, a lot of people would have just kind of written that off.
Yes, sir.
You know, they would have thought, well, my husband was going to die, wasn't in good condition, whatever, but she decided to come to you to seek justice.
Yes.
Why?
I'm not sure why she picked her law firm. I'd like to think that she knew we were going to do a good job for her.
Yeah. But she definitely thought something was wrong with the system.
Well, I think the average person would say, Steve, that it is not right.
Yeah.
Something is wrong when you wait for 42 minutes for an ambulance to show up, and then it's the wrong ambulance. They can't do anything for your husband, who is now, by the way, quit breathing.
Yeah.
Mr. Overman lasted for 39 minutes after the first call was put into 911. He fought to stay alive for 39 minutes. And while he was struggling, his wife was watching him pass away, slowly succumb to the heart attack. I felt compelled, even though there's a number of legal obstacles that you face when you're handling a case like this, I had this visual of her standing there, sitting by her husband's side for that 39 minutes, watching him literally die before her eyes. And I thought, this is a case that needs to see the light of day. The system of justice needs to do something for Mrs. Overman.
And what kind of problems did you encounter when you tried to bring this case out to the public? What were the legal challenges that you had?
Well, if you've been doing personal injury work for a while like I have, you know that when you're going to sue the county, you're up against something called sovereign immunity. Sovereign immunity is an old doctrine that was carried over to the United States from the days when you weren't allowed to sue the king. Unfortunately, that doctrine has found root here in America, and so the basic rule is that local governments, the federal government, have sovereign immunity. The average person is not allowed to sue. But in Virginia, there's an exception to that rule. That exception is if you can prove gross negligence on the part of the government, then you can maintain an action and get compensation.
Another challenge you had, who were the defendants in this?
We sued Prince William County government.
Yes.
We sued all 12 fire and rescue companies here in Prince William County. We sued the private dispatch operator and dispatch system here in Prince William County. We literally sued everybody that was affiliated with the 911 response
Including the person who answered the phone.
Including the dispatcher who answered the phone.
Now, a lot of people might think, well, wait a minute. Some of these people are volunteers. They were giving of their own free time, and here you are suing them. And they think that's not the right thing to do. And you had some fallout from that, didn't you?
It was a very unpopular decision on part of our law firm to sue literally all the fire and rescue companies here in Prince William County.
Because you were on page 1 of all the local papers for a while.
It was the highlight of the newspapers for the entire year and a half that we pursued the case.
So here you are up against kind of an unpopular thing to do, but you're doing it on behalf of someone and all of the citizens of Prince William County, because they would all be vulnerable to this same lack of services that wasn't there, right?
Absolutely. It was something that needed to be brought to the attention of everyone in Prince William County, and hopefully through a show like this, brought to the attention of everyone that sees this show in the entire United States.
Yeah. What happened with the case?
Well, we filed suit in the Eastern District of Virginia Federal Court. We sued in federal court, obviously, because we didn't want to go and get a jury here in Prince William County because the odds were already stacked against us. So we sued in federal court. The trial judge granted summary judgment for the fire and rescue companies.
For our audience, what does that mean?
Well, summary judgment means we didn't have a trial. It means the judge said, as a matter of law, we didn't overcome that obstacle of sovereign immunity. We didn't provide enough evidence that convinced the judge that there was gross negligence. And so the judge granted judgment as a matter of law. We took that up to the Fourth Circuit Federal Court of Appeals. I argued the case in front of the Federal Court of Appeals. The county had an attorney, all the fire and rescue people had an attorney, and so the matter was taken up on appeal. The Federal Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals sustained the trial judge's decision to grant summary judgment to the defendants. And so we also were not successful at the Federal Court of Appeal.
There's one other message I think this sends out is, you know, when we talk about suing volunteers. When a person volunteers for something, he assumes responsibilities. You cannot volunteer for something and sit on your rear end and do nothing and watch someone die, for example. So you are liable. You know, even though you're not being paid, even though you're spending your time not being paid, you are assuming responsibilities. And I think this case sends that message too, doesn't it?
It sends the message that you should be responsible and be careful, but also most of the volunteers, I think, that are involved in EMS realize they have sovereign immunity.
Yeah.
So from a governmental perspective, the government knows that they have to make a pretty bad mistake before they're going to be held accountable.
This window of vulnerability in Prince William County has been closed, meaning it has greatly improved as a result of this case and other ones like it, but I'd like to say mainly of this case. And we have with us today a gentleman by the name of John Brandup,
right,
who is the former chief of Chancellorsville, what is it, Fire and Rescue Department.
That is correct.
Who's also trying to bring that county up to the level that Prince William has right now. So let's bring John on right now. It is my great pleasure to introduce John Brandup to the show. Welcome to the show, John.
Thank you.
You were a retired, you were a captain, a fire chief.
Fire captain.
Fire captain, and you were in charge of the volunteers over in Chancellors, correct?
I was in charge of one of the volunteer stations in Chancellor, Volunteer Fire and Rescue, yes.
And one of the reasons we have you here today is your county that you were involved with over there, which is 2 counties away
Spotsylvania
from
County.
Spotsylvania, has the same kind of problem that Prince William County had years ago, in the sense that there is this window of vulnerability where there's a time period every day or on the weekends where people, when they call into 911, they're not going to get any assistance, are they?
I don't know that I would agree with no assistance, because we do man all of the volunteer and paid man several of the stations. The problem would be that there are 10 stations in Spotsylvania County, and not all of them are manned 24 hours a day.
Now, most of them in this window of vulnerability, and it's generally, what, 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock in the morning, is that right?
6 p.m. to 5 a.m.
Okay, are manned by volunteers, right? A lot of them are manned by volunteers.
Up until last month, that's exactly the way it went. They were manned by volunteers during those time hours.
Can I chime in a minute, Steve?
Sure.
The issue is whether there's somebody on duty at the stations or whether the volunteers have to be called from their house. Then they have to mount up, ride to the station, get on in a wagon, and then go out and respond, which of course increases the response time significantly. What the county would like ideally is to have someone manning and staffing the stations there physically on duty. And what the experience has been in Spotsylvania is that the response time has not been acceptable to many residents. And I think that's the backdrop within which Spotsylvania is trying to resolve their issue.
So let's talk about solutions, okay? You've got volunteers.
That's correct.
They have to come forward voluntarily. If you don't have enough volunteers, you're going to have to pay somebody, correct?
That is correct.
Cities and counties don't have any money. What's the solution?
You know, we have a group that formed a coalition, came up with a website, supported the volunteers and the career, and pushed very, very hard, grassroots movement, to get these stations covered 24/7.
Okay, when you say push, who are they pushing? How are they doing it?
Pushing the county leaders,
Yeah.
the county commissioners.
Going to the newspapers too?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. A website.
Yeah.
And in defense of the county government, our county leaders, they're doing what they think is right. They're supporting the volunteers.
Yeah.
They're providing training opportunities.
So if you volunteer, you better be doing a good job or get the right training.
You absolutely must have to do the right job.
It isn't just showing up.
And recent years, the changes in the requirements for being qualified to volunteer, being qualified to do the job, all of those have increased. It's harder and harder and harder to maintain those certification levels.
One of the other things that I addressed in my introduction to the show is just not individuals who may be overcome with a heart attack or something like that. If there's a terrorist attack, this is the same infrastructure that citizens rely on when they call 911, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So if there's a bomb that blows up in your city, you know, and there's nobody on duty, or you don't have the right people, you got problems. And I'm glad we're doing this show, and I'm glad you could be with us today, because in Spotsylvania, hopefully, because of this show, because of your efforts, because of the Overman case, you know, we will be able to, things will get better there. And I'm very glad you were with us today, and I want to thank you very much for being on the program. Chuck, 911 operators, they can be held liable if they don't do their job, right?
I think if you meet the legal standard, I think in most cases they're going to be entitled to sovereign immunity, which means you have that high threshold that you have to go over, that gross negligence. And gross negligence means an utter and palpable disregard for the safety of others. I know those may not be, but it means basically you have a total neglect. You know about a problem and you totally neglect to do anything about it. And that's a tough stand.
I want to thank you very much for being on the show, Chuck, because this message is going out to America right now.
And it should.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.